DCP Player free. Get it now from digital.net.au.
My first question is a really broad, general one, and that is, where in international exhibition, what is it that you think might be happening outside of America that could teach the Americans something about what's going on? Where are the innovations? Where's the excitement out in the world? Where's the trend? By the way, my last panel here was with the brick exhibitors. And that was fascinating because everybody loved hearing about places where things were booming and the charts all looked like this, straight up. So let's start maybe with IMAX. Where in the world is the appetite for exhibition and exhibition matching that appetite in your point of view?
Well, I think the interesting thing is I'm very privileged and fortunate to be able to travel a lot for a living. But I think it's fascinating to me as I travel around the world and you go to different countries and you see just the level of commitment to exhibition that there is around the world. I think if you look at markets like the United States and some of the Western European countries where we had the multiplex phenomenon, 20, 25, 30 years ago in some case, and then you go to some of the newly developed countries, just the quality and the level of exhibition, they've bypassed, they've learned from other countries. And just some of the cinemas that are being built around the world are absolutely, first class, fascinating. I always find it, that level of dedication and commitment to exhibition. And people in this room, people can travel and people can learn from their colleagues around the world and steal ideas and share ideas. And I think in any country of the world, IMAX is in 58 countries now, but in any country around the world that you look at, people are building first-class auditoriums because they know that's what it takes to attract people back into the cinema.
Andrew, that's an interesting observation that they sort of skipped over that growing pains that maybe a lot of multiplexes went through. Forgive me if I don't credit my panelists with the exact questions, because this panel actually has already done their work. They're making me look smart by giving me great things and great topics. One of you had mentioned the upscale nature of concessions and how that's changed. Some of us are old enough to remember when there were no choices in a multiplex concession stand, and now there seemed to be an abundance. Can one of you address the idea of what that upscale concessions experience is like now and how it's different, and are theater owners really capitalizing on this change fully? Any thoughts about the different environment?
Sure. I will address this question and relate also to your previous question. I think a lot of the innovation in the exhibition space is actually being done outside of the U.S. I think, there are great exhibition companies in the US, but many concepts have arrived late in the US. And I think one of them is precisely the luxury cinema concept. I think the luxury cinema concept started earlier in Latin America and Australia, and later in Asia, Southeast Asia, than in the US or Western Europe. So it's interesting to see that a lot of the innovations, even though, back in the 60s, the multiplexes were developed first in the US, some innovations like the luxury cinema concept, which has a very important food and beverage component, developed outside of the US, and it's only taken place in the US in the past couple of years, with, again, some international companies making inroads, in that space. So the F&B component is very important in this because you have a waiter service to your seat, and you prepare the food fresh in the cinema, and it's more like a restaurant, a cinema with a restaurant, rather than the typical, concession stand food that you would find in a traditional cinema. But I'm thinking that in some other spaces, if you go and visit, cinemas in Korea or in Thailand or in Mexico or in Brazil or even in countries like India, you will find many concepts that you don't find yet in North America.
Could you mention some of the things that you're seeing that you think are exciting and maybe trend-setting?
Well, for instance, in Korea, I think everybody knows CGV developed this 4DX technology several years ago, and in Latin America, Cinepolis has been rolling out this new technology, and it's actually something very exciting because it adds special effects to films that are already shot in 3D. So also if you see, for instance, the growth in special formats like IMAX, you see a huge growth in several Asian countries, and again, like what I mentioned, the luxury cinema, I think the concept is growing faster outside of the US than in the US, and I think, and that's just from our own experience, when we entered the US market, we found some theaters in some very nice areas and nice neighborhoods that had not been refurbished in many years. And I think that's no longer the case, but that was still the case a few years ago. And I think it may have to do with something that may be anathema to mention, but it's the famous film zones. You know that in the US you have a protection, a ring of protection around a pre-existing cinema, which you don't find in most countries. In most countries, everybody competes freely against each other, and I think that inhibited at some stage, you know, some innovation and reinvestment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we have cinemas in Europe, and first of all, we have a population growing here. The second thing we can say that yeah, we have some regions with a loss of buying power, and when I came into the industry, they told me this is a recession-proof industry. I just can tell you it is not. And we have been replacing, since a couple of years, our fast lanes by kind of self-service shops. Essentially, because we were not able to serve everyone at those shows of 8 o'clock where we had most of the occupancy. And that gave us the opportunity to offer more products and a much broader product range, and that has helped us to increase the basket size. So people buy more products. On the other hand, we see that older part of the population is more attracted to more local offer and more upscale movies, and there we see suddenly that consumption goes down. And yes, we are amazed about that, but maybe we should not be too amazed, because we were already talking about popcorn movies, and by definition not popcorn movies. And what we are thinking of and where we have to work at is concepts where we can offer them in a different atmosphere to consume something, because they do have even more buying power than younger people and families, and that's a challenge for us. And I'm always saying we need an oyster bar and champagne. Okay, difficult to set up in a cinema, but it highlights that we will have to go more in that direction and be more creative in creating concepts that in an occupancy that goes up and down, we can still offer at a good price and with good quality.
Steve, I was going to say that I think one of the challenges in our industry is not necessarily what can we learn from each other, but what can we learn from outside the industry that is so pertinent and so relevant to today's customers. So, you know, we frequently look at, say, the airport industry, whose challenge was how can they make more money from their customers who are effectively just waiting to get on flights. And now it's all about speeding up the processing on the land side, you know, with e-ticketing, with ease of security, and get people to spend more and more time on the retail side, where effectively, you know, you can increase customer spend. And in a funny sort of way, cinema can learn from that, and we're trying to learn from that as much as possible in Cineworld. So, you know, we've been introducing a lot of e-ticketing, trying to drive customers online, so that effectively you're taking away all the processing from the foyer, and you're encouraging more dwell. And if you're encouraging dwell, you're encouraging spend. And spend goes up, you know, decent margins, as we know. So that has a positive benefit to the bottom line.
Let's step back just one bit, because as I mentioned when I did the brick panel here a few years ago, the 2008 downturn was very much on everyone's minds in every sector of business, including exhibition, and there was a lot of, you know, concern, not to mention some panic. put this in context, you know, the innovations, the things like use of social media, the changes in ticketing, the changes in concessions, the changes in digital and alternative content. Are these happening at a moment where it is urgently adapt or die, that the business needs to have dramatic kind of kickstart and dramatic fixes and changes? Or is this a good moment of calm, steady growth, success, and an opportunity to step in and change things? I mean, do you see changing the cinema business right now as something that requires an urgency, or is that a market by market way to depict it?
If I may answer that, I'd say for our market, for Russia, and we and you go to some of the comments of this great panel here, I'd say that we always thought to be flexible, that there was no set rules. So think absolutely the now, and if you're really lucky, you could catch the future trend before someone else did. So, for example, you're talking about social media. We noticed that in Russia, many people have actually paid their monthly bills through pay boxes, through automated payment machines. And we said, but we have a lot of young people that's not cool to go into a square box. So my team said, well, we basically gone to all automated ticketing, but we designed a ticketing process that looks like the ticketing itself feels like you're dealing with a device, like whether it be an iPad or a mobile phone, but we actually designed a payment process that felt like they were in the same space. So it didn't look like a utility box. It felt very cool, very imaginative, very, very interesting. And we felt that now is actually perhaps in the history of our business, and that it's the greatest time, because now information gets out so quickly and so many people have access to what's going on, that but it could be good and bad, because if you're doing the wrong thing, it gets out there quicker. If you're doing the right thing, maybe that gets out there quicker too. So we actually see, we're very excited about mobile telephony. We're very excited about automation. We've gone to self-serve concessions. We felt we have some very big buildings that we're building, 20,000 square meters. Well, people come in groups, right? Particularly young people. We felt these folks will go get the drinks. These folks will get the salted product, these on out. So we actually see a lot of opportunity, absolutely.
Another thing that I think is perplexing to someone from outside this industry, the studios and the distributors spend an enormous amount of money to market films. One panel I went to, a variety discussion, the global number for marketing was mentioned, $150, $175 million marketing. Blockbusters are clearly, lifeblood for the film business, for what you do. What is the state of collaboration between exhibition and distribution in terms of working together on maximizing these pictures? There's so much at risk for everybody. Is it a more collaborative place than it was a few years ago, or less so? Because I find that mysterious.
I would certainly say that it's as collaborative for me as it was 5-6 years ago. I think there's a lot more that we could and should be doing. Now, we're developing a relationship with the customer. At the end of the day, we're the retailers of their fantastic movies. We've got a database of almost 4 million customers now. And the more we know about those customers, the more we can make our communications with them relevant. And I think one of the objectives that I would like to achieve is if I can help distributors spend slightly less on above the line, but spend slightly more with us in reaching customers with relevant messages at the right time, then all the better. The other thing is what we're starting to work on is much longer lead time. So it's not about just marketing to customers and having a relationship with them when the film opens. It's actually about using social media and working with their publicity teams up to 8, 9, 10 months before the release of the movie, so that you're starting to build that interest, that engagement with you as a cinema chain on their products well in advance of the release. So when it comes to release, you can really maximize the box office, but then also making sure that because we've built a relationship with customers and we know who's coming to our cinemas, who hasn't been to see the movie. So what then can we offer kind of towards the back end of the release of the movie, so before it comes off screen, and then start to get offers to them. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges with distributors is, you know, they don't want to devalue their films, of course, but there's an opportunity to stimulate frequency of cinema going towards the back end of the movie release.
That does sound like it requires a kind of collaboration in terms of marketing spend and sharing dollars with the retail level. Are you suggesting that it happens a little more than it did, or it's something that could happen more? Are there examples that any of you are experiencing where this resonates, the talking about knowing your moviegoers in your neighborhoods and your retail customers? Is there a way to apply that knowledge in a meaningful way where distributors pay attention to that? Yes?
Well, I think the collaboration between distributors and exhibitors is critical, and at least in the countries where we operate, it's a very collaborative endeavor. And I think distributors have come to realize that some of the most effective marketing is through the theaters, through the exhibitors, not only the traditional advertisement on the screen and the point of purchase placements, but also what Justin was alluding to, the loyalty programs and the social networks. We have 4.6 million fans on Facebook, and we know what ages, what gender, what type of movies they like, so we can engage these customers in a much more effective way. We can actually start conversations that are relevant to them, and we can also measure what's the buzz that each different film is creating prior to the release. So that actually also helps us in knowing, how many shows we have to give to certain title, because we know the expectation that is being built, is very large or is very small. So I think engaging, our customers through our databases, through social networks, through loyalty programs. For instance, we're trying to create a Cinepolis digital environment in which we're merging our CRM, or customer relations management, or loyalty program, and the social networks to be able to more effectively communicate with each potential customer.
And you asked a minute ago, is there an urgency to change the way traditionally some of the things have been done? And I think the answer to that is yes, there is an urgency, because I've got 3 kids, and we all know teenagers and the way they consume media is so vastly different, and the way they consume entertainment is vastly different. And there is an urgency to keep that connection with the customer. I know at IMAX we feel very strongly that when you come into the cinema, it has to be a fantastic experience and a premium experience. But also, there has to be that connection that you establish, and we feel that there has to be a differentiated experience. And a lot of what we do is about making sure that when that customer comes to the auditorium, he or she can't get that experience at home. And whether that's film shot with the IMAX camera, or a different aspect ratio, or a dedicated marketing program, whatever it is, it has to feel that it's differentiated, and the substitute is not sitting at home watching it on your iPad.
It's also interesting to hear the discussion about capturing data on moviegoers, because if you think about the position that the exhibitors are in, this relationship and this ability, I'll bet you it's not that many years ago a panel would not have been talking about capturing data on moviegoers, and now it seems like the people are very much accustomed to that being part of the experience on both sides. Is there a retail play in all this? Because one of the secrets of the studio survival mode is selling a lot of stuff besides movie tickets. There are gigantic franchises spin off gigantic products, merchandising sales that generate billions and billions of dollars. Is the multiplex, is the movie theater of tomorrow partially, is it more of a retail space than it is today? Is that an opportunity for you, or is that illusion?
I think the multiplex is certainly the answer, because you offer a much broader choice of movies. And we have seen that in other industries as well, the automotive industry. Some car makers who used to have 2 to 3 models 20 years ago, and now have a complete range, because they want to cover all the different customer clusters. And that's what we have to do, and that's a point where we could work better together with the studios. I stated a year ago in Barcelona that we need more estrogens than testosterone on the screen because of a population growing greater. And you know, Hollywood is often looking at the world market with BRIC countries, but the demographics in Europe, for instance, are completely different. And I think that we are losing potential, and that Hollywood and we are losing potential in Europe. And so we have to sit together and what could we do better? What is the kind of movie and genre we need? And you see a tremendous success of local movies, and often with very low marketing and efforts and low production budget as well. So there's an opportunity to work together to, you know, we can't afford that we have to go and explain our results as a company. We are a listed company, and that we didn't have the appropriate movie for a family during the summer. For instance, that's something we have to anticipate. And I think that is something where the data capturing helps us to say that's the kind of movie programming we want. Internally, we are talking about more active movie programming than passive movie programming. Less undergoing what is offered by the studios, but going into the market, what do we need to cover the complete range of customer clusters? And then adapting, maybe because they each want a different experience. How could we, for each of them, adapt the experience and give an experience that is more appreciated by them?
You know, your comments connect viscerally for me, because in doing my research this morning, I think it's today's papers, have a story that the Hollywood share of global box office is down this year, which means someone else is making these movies that people are seeing. Is the European marketplace in a position right now, or any of these markets, Russian or Chinese, to start picking up the slack or developing what you're describing, Eddy, a kind of film that has almost more of a hold on the local audience, is what you're describing. It has a connectivity to the audience that makes up for the fact that it doesn't have the big special effects or the big stars.
It remains difficult, and we see that we need, for each country, financial support to get those movies produced. But on the other hand, we see, for instance, in France, local content represents about 40% of local tickets. We see that on average in France they go 3 times a year to the movies, and that the average life stage, the age is older on average than, for instance, in Belgium. But then in December we had a couple of very good local blockbusters. 4 local movies. 40% of the tickets in Belgium as well were local movies, and the popcorn consumption was going down. So on average, an older people, an older customer, and that's really the way to go. But we still need support, because the market in Europe is very fragmented. It's a market of different cultures and languages, and that makes it for Hollywood as well difficult to do something. But I think, you know, it doesn't have to be a local movie, but a more upscale movie. And we are, in our preference center, we see as well more comedy.
Local comedies, always an amazing story. I mean, there's a comedy, I love this title, it gives me a chance to say it in public. Fuck you, Goethe. 75 million, I don't have the most recent numbers in Germany alone. For a local comedy, I don't think it cost a lot of money to produce. But that's been, the last 10 years, the German producers have been producing films that break out. The French, of course, make a movie like Welcome to the Sticks, 140 million or something crazy.
And the great thing about a movie like Welcome to the Sticks is, it did travel across borders. And I think what you're saying is, there is a globalization of content that does take place. in such an interconnected world. You know, we've started doing local language films at IMAX as well. Traditionally, we did Hollywood movies. This past year, we did 9 local language movies. That's up from 5 the previous year. We did Stalingrad, which was a fantastic movie that Paul was a producer on. And that was, I think, the highest non-English language, non-Chinese language film in China. So, you know, you're seeing that, you know, films like that can travel. We did Doom, the Indian movie. We played that in 11 countries in December. So you're seeing content, I think, that can travel across borders. Comedies, obviously, are the most difficult genre, but the big blockbusters that are produced in different countries can.
Not having the Hollywood marketing apparatus behind these films, does that pose a particular set of challenges or not?
I would say that when you talk about local language films, I mean, from a selfish position, from an industry standpoint, we're really, we think it's a key element for our success and our future growth. As Andrew just mentioned, without local films, you know, invariably not every year is a good year for Hollywood films to travel, even in the United States, right? There's going to be a down year, but to the greater extent we can have more local films be successful, which we found from Stalingrad, which was amazing. We ended up getting film goers over 35 that we hadn't seen ever. I mean, that business kind of dissipated in our markets over the last 15 years. And the truth is that our patrons want to see stories in their local culture, local myths, local stories, and so on. So you're right, the comedy genre was the easy one to kind of get out. That seemed to me to be stuck, though, kind of in a certain bandwidth in terms of box office opportunity. As Andrew mentioned, we see Stalingrad and V and these movies that are opening $20 million weekends. You know what I mean? And we're getting, if it wasn't for those, we'd be talking about a down 2013 for our market.
They picked up the slack.
They picked up the slack, and I think that, I mean, for us, it's great to have great content from wherever it comes that our customers want to see, but local films do generate for us. They bring in families on the comedies and the melodramas, but these blockbuster type events that we're starting to see now in our market, we've had three blockbuster films with larger than traditional budgets. It brought in actually older film goers as well, which was a great win for us, and now we're hopeful that those folks have been to the cinema. Will they come back again?
Sorry.
What you see is those local movies create more mouth-to-mouth. There's not a big bang in terms of marketing and then a huge record box office and a short lifetime. The lifetime of those movies is much longer, and the mouth-to-mouth is very important. Reason why we introduced in our interaction with the customer, we were asking about would you recommend this movie, and we tried to calculate based upon the definition that you can find on the internet, the net promoter score, and that's very predicting for the success that kind of movies will have, and that helps us to program those movies.
So, in terms of this planning and talking about some of the macro trends, you referred to the graying of Europe. Is the movie-going audience graying faster than the general population? In other words, what Andrew alluded to, I have a test group of one in my home, teenager, and I keep thinking I wouldn't want to be in network TV, because I don't think my daughter's ever watched it. And I can't imagine she's the only one who just is on a handheld and a computer, and she does like to go to the movies. So, you know, are we looking at a generational shift in terms of entertainment choices that everybody in this business has to get really, really serious about holding on to? Is the blockbuster, the giant special effects blockbuster, is that the end-all be-all in terms of holding on to young eyeballs?
I think it varies a lot from country to country, but at least in the countries where we're present in Latin America, the States and India, in Latin America we do not see that graying of the movie going public. In fact, the majority of our audience is young people. The biggest age group is from 15 to 35. That's where we have over 60% of our tickets sold, and actually only 5% are 55 and older. So actually there's no graying of the audience in Latin America, nor in India. It's mainly a source of entertainment, or a form of entertainment that appeals broadly to young audiences.
And the importance of the blockbusters to connect with that young audience, or are there other things that are working with a young audience besides Transformers or Hobbit or any of the big films?
I think, the blockbusters definitely drive a lot of the young crowd, especially a lot of special effects, action films. In Latin America, family films, animated films, they do very, very well. But not necessarily only the large blockbusters and the franchise films, also films that are one-time shot, like Lazio, and going back to the local content discussion. We had 2 Mexican films, 2 Mexican comedies in the top 10 of the year, and actually the film most widely watched in 2013 in Mexico was Mexican film Instructions Not Included. 15 million people went to see it in Mexico, and also it traveled to the US and it did over about $51 million in the US box office. So, and there was no prequel, and it was not a big special effect or a big budget. It probably cost between $4 and $5 million.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I had profiled the young filmmaker who did We Are the Nobles, which for about a minute was the biggest film of all time in Mexico. And then Instructions came out and took the crown very quickly. But the fact that there were 2 films this successful in Mexico, is that an anomaly? Is that something, or is that the beginning of something changing?
Well, I certainly hope that it's the beginning of a trend, that we'll see more and more local films, driving big crowds and being in the top 10 of the year. And We Are the Nobles was mainly for a young crowd. I mean, it played to all audiences, but with a strong component of young people. And I think it's just a reflection that everyone, or everywhere around the world, there's a big appetite to see local films in local language that reflects local humor and local way of life. So I think there's a huge potential for that.
And that has a power that makes up for the marketing spend. It has a connectivity to the audience, that if you can mobilize them and mobilize the awareness of this picture being on offer. I did a panel up in Toronto a couple of years ago asking about whether or not social media had really affected marketing cost at all. That was a film distribution panel. The answer was emphatically no. It did not, the numbers just keep going up for marketing. Is social media impacting on your ability to get people into your theaters?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a free medium at the end of the day. It doesn't cost you to engage customers on Facebook, on Twitter. And I think, as Andrew rightly pointed out, there's such a demand for content. Show me some stuff that's new and interesting and it's never been seen before, that I can retweet, that I can repost. I think it's...
So fresh material from, like extras from the movies, interviews, EPK, designs, anything that feels like something that makes it more personal.
Yeah, I've always been interested, when you go to distributor presentations, they always say, please never kind of retweet, repost. Clearly it's because they want to control kind of what they send out when, but at the end of the day, we are all in the job of promoting movies and promoting the best bits that we see. So I would kind of encourage distributors to say, go out and spread the word about what you've seen, because hopefully we all love the content that we see. Hopefully we'd only ever say positive things about content that we see. Obviously, a number of us have been in the industry long enough to know that sometimes we can be a bit cynical about some of the product we see, but at the end of the day, if you're telling customers that the product that's on the screen is good product, then hopefully they'll come back. We're trying to encourage frequency of cinema going. I was just going to touch also, sorry, on your point about the growing audience. Certainly in the UK, it's a growing cohort. It's quite a challenge to reach that audience. You've kind of got to wait for the relevant product to be on the screen for them. It's part of the reason why we acquired Picture House back in 2012, is because actually we know that the experience, the cinema experience that they deliver really appeals to that audience. I think one of the concerns of kind of big multiplexes is the perception by the older audience that it's going to be noisy, the kids are going to be charging around, that the Coke and popcorn fodder isn't the sort of product for them. So actually I think the challenge for those exhibitors that are purely in the multiplex environment is to create a real flexibility in in the experience they deliver. So, flexibility in changing the mood of the lighting, in changing the mood of the music, in once we go digital in the foyers, and making sure that the product on screen is relevant to those audiences as well. But it is definitely a challenge. It is a growing market, so it should also be seen as an opportunity.
I'm going to come back to your digital point in 1 second. Was there a film in the last year that surprised you and you learned something either from it overperformed or underperformed and there was a lesson in it?
Gravity for us.
Yeah.
I mean, Gravity has been just a phenomenon. I know it hasn't been for the general industry, but for IMAX, it's the third highest grossing movie ever in IMAX's history, after Avatar and Dark Knight Rises. And I think it just, to me, it highlighted the power of the big event movie and the big premium experience. And, I had so many people, friends, colleagues, say to me, don't watch Gravity on your iPad, don't watch it on your iPhone. You have to see it on a big screen with fantastic sound. Yeah.
That was the mantra coming straight out of the gate with that movie. Was there something in that particular story or Quaron's way of telling that story that you think separated it from a million sci-fi movies?
I think, when you would watch the movie on a big screen, it felt very immersive. It felt like you were part of the movie. And I think you were captivated by that, you were captured by that, you were brought into the story, and it became a very personal story for a lot of people.
And he kept it focused.
He did.
I would say in Russia we had 4 local produced films that grossed over $30 million each. And I want to make a point what Andrew's saying is that large format like IMAX, and what for us is so important is 3D. I can't tell you how impressed we are and how we're working with our technology partners. 3D seems to be a real advantage in the sense that moviegoers in Russia feel like that can only be seen in the cinemas. We do have this horrific problem in Russia, I'm sure some of the gentlemen have here, of piracy, which is just really so disappointing how we can get a handle on that. But the audience feels like you can't see that anywhere else, you can't pirate it. And the 3D, particularly on films like Gravity, and we had like Stalingrad, and V, which was a recent film, the audiences are reacting very well to 3D. And I'm amazed how it continues to kind of grow, the interest of that continues to grow in Russia.
One of the fascinating things for me about the difference between international and domestic is that 3D seems to have plateaued for the moment in the US, but it still seems to be going great guns elsewhere. Any thoughts on why that might be? Why audiences have an appetite for 3D stronger in some places and less strong in others?
No, I'll say that in Mexico it has also plateaued. It's a little bit like
for Latin America.
For Latin America, and I think maybe we started charging a very high surcharge on top of 2D, and that's been gradually coming down. So it's 3D has sort of plateaued. On the other hand, films like Gravity, as Andrew was mentioning, did extremely well in 3D. That was a format that the word of mouth said you must see it in a large screen, and in 3D. You can't wait for the DVD. You have to see it in a cinema. And for instance, Gravity, we showed it in IMAX and in 4D, and with less than 1% of the screens in these formats, they accounted for 15% of our box office. So with less than 1% of the screens.
By the way, that's the experience we had too with IMAX. I think it was about 15% of the opening box office. I think Gravity was a similar number for our market. But I would say, I'd like to go back to 3D for a second, that I think that there was a rush to kind of take advantage of 3D as a revenue opportunity, and I think that folks didn't put in the best quality 3D. They didn't put in, like, are you giving folks dirty glasses again? Is your vision, is it obscured, is it dark? So I also think that the quality presentation of 3D is very important. That's one thing that we've worked really hard to kind of reinvigorate.
I think also, Paul, just making sure that the right movies are put in 3D, to me, is incredibly important. I think, when 3D first came out, I think, everybody, it was a gold rush, and everything was being put in 3D, and I think we did a disservice to the industry by doing that.
So you won't do Shark Tornado?
Never say never. Again, from the outside, it appears that technologically, exhibition has been undergoing more dramatic technological change in the past 10 years than it ever went through any other period. That, you know, just again, to the casual observer from the outside, every time I do one of these panels, there is something happening. DC is an interesting looming opportunity. When you look at all of the things that are happening in the technology of exhibition, what has gotten your attention the most? What is either the one that scares you the most or excites you the most?
Well, I was going to say, you know, innovate or die, really, and it's really
Is there
important.
anything coming down the pike for the moviegoer that you think is game-changing or modifying the experience in some way, or modifying your business in a way that's significant? I mean, getting rid of prints is obviously a good thing for the studios because they don't have to spend money on prints. I'm not sure how that impacts on exhibition.
Well, certainly, I think from a marketing perspective, you know, I'm very keen to see as much as possible for us to digitize our foyers, because then that gives us the flexibility to be able to day part messaging, you know, the right propositions to the right audience, the right day of the week. I think the mobile is a really interesting space because that is growing phenomenally fast. We're actually selling more tickets on our mobile channels than we are on our desktop at the moment. I think from, you know, all of us within exhibition are keen to make sure we really monetize the on-screen advertising. We're seeing more and more second screening, so the ability for customers to be able to interact with the content that they're seeing on screen is something that we shouldn't be afraid to encourage and adopt. You know, because the younger kids of today have grown up with mobile in their pockets, and they don't necessarily want to sit in an auditorium for 2.5 hours unplugged. You know, they want to be able to tell their mates that they've seen something fantastic. They want to be able to retweet or repost what they've seen. And certainly in the pre-reel space, there's a real opportunity. I think there's two opportunities. One, if we can start to understand who these customers are. From an advertising perspective, exhibitors and screen advertisers have got a real opportunity to start to pass some of that customer demographic data back to the advertisers on screen. And no other, I don't think any other media can compete with that. So that could be
the technology opportunities really in the marketing and the engagement and the communication, not necessarily in the presentation part. The most exciting part for you,
well, the marketeers, so I understand that, of course, yeah.
But it's also it's a challenge too because, as he said, like for example, one of the problems we have is people don't turn their damn phones off, right?
Yeah,
so you might have a young person that's acceptable at 14, but you might have that fellow king for Stalingrad with his wife who's 37, 38, and then so we're also again, you know, you talked about retail and cinemas. One of the things that we work really hard to figure out and deploy and execute upon is that is the most pristine place, amazing place to enjoy this story. So how do you do that with all these overwhelming technical advances? You have this kind of stuff. Different cultures
that engage in a different way.
Right. So you can be busy, but like starting a lobby and things like that. How do you convey that this is a place to have that experience, but also get across your business opportunity?
I think for us also laser is a very exciting opportunity. At IMAX we've spent a great deal of time and effort on laser. We licensed the Eastman Kodak digital laser technology. We're developing a laser product. As a matter of fact, we had a demo in our office in Santa Monica last November where we had 70, 80 exhibitors, international and domestic, come and see a prototype. And to me, that's what we have to do to continue to make cinema relevant and that differentiated experience. Fantastic light on the screen, great contrast, which the filmmakers love, and a wide color gamut, which I think audiences are going to notice a real difference.
So it will translate to a different movie-going experience.
I think absolutely.
I want to make sure we have a couple of minutes for questions. I hope in this group there's someone that is bold enough to step forward and demand an answer to a question. Is there anyone that wants to ask this panel a question? This is the nicest group. So lunch, you're all in like a turkey coma. You have mashed potatoes and bread. I have a buyer. Thank you.
Hello. I'd just like to ask the panel about high frame rate, if they've had an experience with it, and the experience of the customers as well.
Experience with what, sorry?
The high frame rate. This was much talked about at Cinemacon a couple of years ago when the previous Hobbit rolled out in high frame rate. That was the big experiment. Is the verdict, the jury still out on high frame rates, or?
So I can tell you that in Latin America we did not charge a premium for a high frame rate, unlike some European markets, which they succeeded charging a little bit more. And overall, the audiences didn't really understand the high frame rate. It was, I think, the communication was not effective enough to explain to them, what was this new high frame rate. And overall, my impression is that they didn't love it either. It's not like everybody was talking about it after the film and saying, "Oh, we must see the next Hobbit," or in high frame rate. I think I actually heard comments of people that did not like it, that they thought it looked too real. You could see the prosthetics of the elves and the trolls, much more vividly, and so they said that it took away a little bit of the magic of the movies and made it a little bit way too real, and so removing a little bit of the fantasy.
There's been a lot of talk, I think, about variable frame rate, which I've read, and to me that's probably a more interesting use of the technology, that in certain sequences you get the advantage of high frame rate, the big, broad action epic sequences, the fast action sequences, but the close-ups, as Alejandro mentioned, some people found that a little bit creepy, a little bit too personal. So variable frame rate is an option in the future. Then I think hopefully filmmakers will take that up.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? Because I'm going to add one more.
Hi, how are you? I have a question about when I own and operate a smaller community movie theater. We have not gone digital yet because we are fundraising for a digital conversion. And for the smaller houses that have not digitized yet, we still haven't had a clear answer about when they're no longer going to be printing in 35 millimeter. So I just wanted to know if you knew when that was actually going to happen, because the date seems to be pushed off.
You want to know if they know the date that there will be no more 35?
Yes, because we're still operating in 35 millimeter.
I think that date passed before.
It did.
I think for our market, obviously, you're in North America and US.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we basically were 100% digital because we expected there's no more film, and that there is film now is kind of a little bit of a holiday for it. But we assume by the end of this year, at least in Russia, there'll be no more film distribution.
In Europe, some of the markets are not completely digital, and there we hear that those exhibitors are hearing or are receiving letters these days that they will have to pay for their prints. So what will happen after that, I don't know, but I can imagine that an exhibitor who doesn't have the funds to go digital, if he has to pay for a print, that is not the best way to continue, of course.
Do you think the price will come down significantly anytime soon for us to be able to do that for the smaller theaters?
Talking about the equipment costs?
Yes.
Did you?
I think so. That's what we see. There's an evolution in technology. Laser will be very expensive. Will price pressure on the traditional technologies. So we've seen a price erosion in digital projections. I think the demand for the market was that high in the past 2 years that we had stable prices, but bit by bit, I suppose it will go down again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Is alternative content finally developing into a serious revenue stream for you? Because when I was in Munich, I was talking with the gentleman behind Metropolitan Opera, and that seems like a success story that was a long time in coming, because alternative content has been talked about for a long, long time. Is anything happening on that front that is significant for international exhibitors?
I think it's great that it's bringing new audiences into theatre, but let's be realistic. For us, it's kind of 1 to 1.5% of what the box office is. Yeah. So it's not a game changer in the respect of suddenly driving kind of new added revenues that we never had before. Yeah. It could partly be a reason to go digital as 3D, etc., But no, I think the fact that you are able to get new audiences into the theatres and then hopefully the opportunity to upsell kind of relevant upcoming product to their film-related product. Get them used to coming back into theaters is really important.
And satellite, is this significant in any way outside of the arcane? Is there something when satellite is 3-4 years from now, 5 years from now, is it a significant game changer for anyone?
I mean, for us, I mean, it's just amazing when you look, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, we all had projector booths and film cans and all these big roll, and now it's like operating a spaceship. You know, we have these digital knocks, and what we like about it is that we can get real-time information at the moment. You know, it allows you when you're managing things to measure them in real time. I think satellite gives us a lot of opportunity also to cut some cost out of the system, but again allows to have better control and real-time information about all the various properties and business.
It'll be a good cost management tool. I'm wondering if it'll be something for alternative content, because it does open up the opportunity to beam a lot of stuff live into a theater if people want to go to the local theater and see it on the horizon.
I do agree, for us, alternative content has not been, it's been very difficult. It's actually been a net loss for us. But we've tried things, our booking department, to try to bring in new audiences, but it's very challenging. Of course, we believe that as technology changes, 3D, maybe particularly sporting events and things like that, that there'll be an opportunity, but it's difficult.
Yes, for us, it's also between 1 and 2%, like 1.5%. And we've tried everything, you know, from opera to wrestling. And there are some properties that work better than others, and then some that work for some period, and then maybe they sort of plateau as well. We're trying this, what we've succeeded, I think, the most is with some sporting events. So this summer we're doing the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, and that probably will have some potential. We did it 4 years ago, and now we're going to do it again. And I think those type of events could, you know, potentially really enlarge, but it's still a niche. Still a small niche.
Thanks.
I think Steve, I was going to say one thing that I'd be keen to understand from any exhibitors out there is who's been able to crack the business market? Because if you think about kind of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, whilst the kids are at school, the utilization of our theatres is relatively light. And the business market, you know, if you've got digital auditorium, you can plug and play. I think it's a huge opportunity, but it's kind of getting businesses over the hump of experiencing it. That's been the challenge, and certainly in the UK market, I think if exhibitors worked harder together as a unit to try and educate businesses, that could be an interesting revenue stream for our industry. And I suppose I'd be interested to know if there's anyone out there who's really been able to crack their own markets with this.
Thanks. Well, I want to thank my panelists for taking time out. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.